Hello my quilty friends. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to my home. I'm not in my sewing room today. I'm out here in my living room with my quilt frames set up, aiming right towards the TV if I want to watch a TV program. Sometimes I'll put something on that I can just listen to as I'm doing some sewing. So this quilt that I have on my frame is the fall from my sister appliquing the top with the bunny heel pattern in her. She tweaked it a little to put what she wanted on each block, and she stitched it on the block. I had mailed her the quilt top and some fabric, and this is what she put together. And once I get it all done, I'm going to show you each block and what I have got done to it. I'm hoping to finish this up soon as I get this sewing done, and I'm going to show you how I am stitching some tossed acorns and leaves in between the applique and the sashing of the quilt. And I'm hand stitching this. The quilt top itself was done on a machine, and then my sister did the applique, and then now I'm quilting it out, and I will also put the binding on it. I'll show you the back as well, but I'm going to show you what I'm doing today. Okay guys, I want to show you how that I want to hand stitch some tossed acorns and leaves throughout my quilt blocks. I have stitched all the way around everything in each block, but I have a lot of room still left out here, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to do this on my quilt frame, but I'm thinking about moving my quilt to one of the quilt hoops and working on it while I'm sitting on the sofa. But I use this little template, and you can get these on Amazon.com, and I use these as a template. You can draw it on if you're really good at it, but I have a whole selection of these, large or small. And, you know, I just trace this out, and I'm going to have them tossed all different ways. The maple leaf and the acorn. And then I will also stitch all of this right here. And I'll do that on my quilting frame. But I just want to show you how I get it pretty accurate. Now, I use a number 2 pencil. And the reason I do that is because the erasable, invisible pins, the heat from my hands causes them to disappear. So therefore, I use the number 2 pencil. I got to get a pencil sharpener. My husband sharpened that for me. I think it's sharp enough. Let me see. I think I've got one a little bit better. But these are just going to be placed throughout the whole quilt, tossed here and there and everywhere, just to give it a little bit of added stitching in here. Now, when I get this done, I will throw it through the washer and the dryer. Maybe I may air dry this one, it being an applique quilt, but we'll see. If I do throw it in the dryer, it'll be very low heat for quite a while, probably 2 or 3 rounds of just mainly air. But we'll go over that later. But I want to show you how I draw these on, and I just take my sharp number 2 pencil, and it doesn't have to be very dark. You sort of know what the item is. And although there's breaks in this template, I just go ahead and, you can fill that in if you want, or a lot of times I know where it's going. And this is going to be my layout, and then I just take my thread, and I have my little knot on my thread here, right there. And then I'm just going to weed this through on the top layer and pull that. You'll hear it sort of snap, and bury the end of your thread. And then I'm just going to do little stitches. And let me speed this up, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get done. Okay guys, I'm down to my last stitch here. So I just want to bury my knot. Just running through the top 2 layers. And you'll hear it click, your little knot will disappear. And then I like to go ahead and run this a couple more times through my fabric before cutting it off. And there it is. Now you can see the pencil mark in there, but when it's washed and dried, all that disappears. Just like an invisible pen that you would use. And if you can use those, that's great. It just disappears on me and from the heat of my hand. So I just use a number 2 pencil and it works just fine. So I'm going to do all kinds of these tossed throughout my quilt, and the next step will be putting my binding on. Taking my quilt off of the quilt frame, I've got it laid out here on my table because I'm checking all of my stitches, and I love how the back of the quilt, I think, should look just as important as the front. And then turning the quilt over, I am checking for any unfinished stitches, and I do see an acorn I forgot. But I leave this extra batting and the backing of the fabric here just for that added shrinkage as you're stitching. Now later on I'll just trim that off before putting the binding. Okay, all of the stitching for my quilt is done except for the binding. And now I just need to trim this off, and I have my favorite scissors. I only use these, and I'll show you a close-up. I only use these for cutting fabric or hair, nothing else, no paper, no nothing. So I just have to trim this off and then add my binding. And add my binding. Now that all of the edges are trimmed up, I need to go to Hobby Lobby and pick out some fabric. I didn't find anything on hand. I thought I wanted green, and the lighting at Hobby Lobby just made this green look terrible. There's so many variations of green, so I wound up changing my mind on the green, and I found some fall colors. I found the gold, and I really did like it. It was bright. It would really stand out and bring out a lot of the fall colors that are on the quilt. So I wound up looking at this brown and this harvest gold. I found a wine color that was very pretty too, like a deep burgundy red. So it's hard to make up my mind on what I want here. Sweet friends, now that I am back home, the only thing left that I have to do is put on my binding to finish this quilt up. So I couldn't make up my mind. I actually went to Hobby Lobby. That's where I get my fabric now. Joann's store is closed in our area. I think they all closed. But I went in there to get green. And this is what I come out with. I have a brown, a wine color, and then a golden color. So I'm not sure which I'm going to put on the quilt. So since I couldn't make up my mind, I got a yard of each. And I'm going to cut these in strips of 2.5 inches and sew them together to make the binding on my quilt. And I'll show that process as I go along and how I put my binding on. And I'm actually going to use the machine for that, since it's so many layers of fabric on the edge, because you've got 3 here, and then if you fold it, that's another 2, another 4. So that is a lot of fabric to go through using just a needle. So, I mean, it can be done. I've done it before, but I want to go ahead and do this on the machine and make sure that it's on there really good. Then I'm going to wash the quilt. I'm going to dry it, and I'll walk you through that process. After getting the edges all straight, I'm going to cut this fabric into 2.5-inch strips for my binding on my quilt. After getting all my strips cut, I want to cut off this selvage pieces on the end. You could do that now, or you could have done it before, just cut all the salvage pieces off the end. But I think I'm only going to have to use 4 or 5 of these strips for my quilt. It's not that big, but I went ahead and cut it up. It's all ready, and I have rolled it up for a future binding project. Now I need to sew all of my binding strips together, but I do not want to sew them just straight. It'll be too big and bulky. So I am laying these face to face, one going one way and one going the other way, and I'm going to take this and measure and mark it with the pencil just to give you an idea. If you can sew it without having the mark on it, that's great, but you're just going to sew this corner to corner, and then I'm going to take it to the machine and sew directly on that line and bring it back and cut the extra off. And once I get that cut, then I'll just press it out, and it will be all ready to go on my quilt. Okay guys, this is what it looks like. You see that? And you see how this is stitched? That way, when it is folded over, it's not going to be as bulky in one area. But for now, I am going to cut this off, all this extra. and just about 1/4 inch from the seam. You don't want to cut into the seam. And I will press that out with my iron when I get them all together. You can finger press it if you want. And when it's folded, as you can see, it's not just one straight line of bulk of 4 pieces of fabric. So let me put all of my binding together. I now have all of my binding stitched together, and I went ahead and pressed it in half so that that's just going to give me a little bit of how much I'm going to use on one side, where the fold is going to be, and what I'm going to tuck in on the front side. Now I'm going to go ahead and overlap this using about 10 inches before I start pinning it, and then I will pin it all the way around the quilt, take it to my machine, and I will leave the last 10 inches lapping over the starting piece. Now I'm not going to get into today how I stitch my 2 ends of my binding. I'm going to send you over to Sew Becca's channel. She has one of the best binding videos that I have found on YouTube. I am using Becca's method on my binding on this quilt, so I will put that link in the description box below for you to go over and watch her video on how she suggests to bind your quilt. After pinning my binding on to the back side of the fabric, I took it to my machine and I sewed it all the way around using Becca's method. So if you want to know how to connect your binding, she has 2 different ways, and I did the second way that she had suggested on connecting the binding pieces. But I'm not going to get into that today, but I am going to recommend her video. What I want to do next is go ahead and fold all of my edges to the front after pressing the back. Now I'm folding over the front. On her method, she may have already folded it, but there is a couple of ways to do it, and this is the easiest way I found to do it on my quilt. So I am folding over towards the front, and I am going to press it, and I'm not going to pin it, and then I'm going to take it to the machine, and the quilt will be done and ready to wash and dry. I will be using the Dreft laundry detergent because it's not going to be as harsh on the fabric, and the Shout color catchers, especially for the first washing.